Hey friends, it's me, Pastor Doug, with another word of encouragement for the day for today, Friday, January 21st. And today's word comes out of the book of Daniel, chapter 6, verse 10. And it's actually a passage that I read a couple of weeks ago during a Sunday sermon. But I want to bring our attention back to it today because it ties in perfectly with our emphasis this week on the significance of prayer, the opportunity that you and I have to connect relationally with God through prayer. So I'm going to read to you from Daniel chapter 6, verse 10, but let me give you just a little bit of backstory first, and then I'll read it and then kind of make some connection for us. So many of us are probably familiar with the story of Daniel, but just in case you're not familiar with Daniel's story, let me give you the quick synopsis. So Daniel was a Hebrew. He was well educated, and he was living in the southern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom called Judah. And the nation of Babylon was kind of going around gobbling up other countries and other regions and areas. And Babylon came in under King Nebuchadnezzar and conquered Judah and essentially deported and exiled some of the best and the brightest of the Hebrews who were living in Judah at the time, including Daniel and many of his friends. So imagine Daniel as maybe he was 16, 17, 18, bright, sharp, well-educated, and he gets deported to Babylon. And Daniel spends the rest of his life, probably another 75 to 80 years of his life, living in Babylon. And the Babylonians worked really hard to indoctrinate and assimilate the exiles into their culture, which they worked hard to do with Daniel. Daniel even worked in the king's court. And so he was about as close to the center of power in Babylon as you can possibly be. But we see something really unique and interesting in Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. A group of men have convinced the king to have everyone in Babylon pray only to the king for the next 30 days. And we read what Daniel does in response to this decree. Now, when Daniel learned that a decree had been published, he immediately went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and he prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Friends, that phrase, just as he had done before, can also be translated into English phrases like just as he had always done, or just as he was in the habit of doing. And so we see that here in Daniel chapter 6, Daniel had a habit, a rhythm, a daily practice of praying, not just once, but 3 times a day at regular intervals. He would stop what he was doing and he would pray. Now that's important when we think about the fact that Daniel was in the middle of pagan Babylon, right? He had been exported or exiled rather out of his home country, away from the temple, away from the religious sort of centerpiece of his faith. And yet, in the middle of pagan Babylon, where the Babylonian culture was doing everything it could to assimilate him in to the cultures and practices and religious beliefs of Babylon, Daniel continued to resist. And one of the ways that he continued to resist this assimilation was to continue this regular rhythm, this practice, this habit of daily prayer. Now, it's also interesting to note, and I'm not going to get into all the details of this, but based on the king that is the king at the time that this story takes place, we can actually do a little bit of historical math and guess and estimate that by the time this happens, this story in Daniel chapter 6 happens, Daniel had been in Babylon for at least 58 years. It's been 58 years since Nebuchadnezzar conquered Babylon and conquered Judah and exiled Daniel. Been 58 years since that happened to the time that the Persians took over. And the king that's mentioned in this story is the Persian king. So again, by doing a little bit of historical math, we can determine that Daniel had been in Babylon for over 50 years. That means, friends, that for 50 plus years, Daniel had this daily habit, this daily rhythm of stopping and praying every single day. In fact, 3 times a day. Now, friends, does that mean that you and I need to stop 3 times every day and pray? Well, no, it's not a command, but it is a beautiful example of someone who incorporated a rhythm, a habit into their lives of connecting with God consistently in prayer. And we see that it sustained Daniel during a really, really difficult season of Israel's history. Friends, I hope this encourages you. Remember that this week we are putting into practice a daily rhythm of prayer ourselves. We've encouraged everybody to stop and pray for 5 minutes every single day, at least 5 minutes. I hope that you've taken the dare and that you're joining us with this. Friends, I hope you'll join us this Sunday for our weekend worship services. You can join us in person or online, and then we'll pick these back up on Monday as we continue our I Dare You initiative, as we continue to connect more deeply with God. Have a great day, and we'll see you next Monday.